I'm so pleased both of you are here. Thank you very much for being here. The focus of this panel is on the role of AI in high-impact tutoring. And I just wanted to start by saying that we've been talking a lot today about how really the two key elements of high-impact tutoring is this combination of teaching at really high quality at the right level, and also the relationship that is motivating for students, exciting for students, helps students feel like they're known. And so we really want to keep those two things in mind as we think about how AI might help us bring this to scale, since it is challenging. We all know that it's challenging, and maybe with this new kind of transformational technology, we can figure out some ways to do it. But before we go in and really think about the positive ways we could do it and how this might really help us get there, I just wanted to start with kind of what would happen if we didn't do it well? Like, what would we be doing with high-impact tutoring and AI in 5 years if we weren't using it in the way that in this beneficial way? What might we see? So, Jean-Claude, do you want to start with that?
Sure, I'm happy to start. First of all, it's awesome to be in the presence of greatness on this stage, like a dream come true. What I think about perhaps what could go badly is outsourcing teaching to machines. That really, really worries me. And I'm watching some places where that's beginning to happen. When we look at things like, again, I don't want to name too many names, but like Conmingo, for example, when that kind of stuff is implemented in places where you don't really understand what it takes to move student outcome, you get what you're actually beginning to see. When you see the pushback against screen time, trying to solve a policy, a cultural problem to a policy, that worries me. So making sure that we understand that this is fundamentally about teaching and learning is one thing we have to remember. So in 5 years, if this fails, it's because we've forgotten learning science, we've forgotten the foundations of what it is to have teachers and students and content and parents interact in a way that is meaningful.
I think I'll just piggyback on that with a +1 and then say it would also be problematic if we just outsource AI to vendors.
Yes.
Because we've got to have people involved in building the tools that they themselves can use. And there are places where that's happening, you know about that. And it makes a huge difference in the utility of the tools and the ways in which humans then can interact with each other, with teachers with each other, with students, and with the tools themselves to get maximum benefit from them. So I think both of those things are things that could happen and would sell us short on what we could experience.
So now let's go to the possibilities. So when we think about high-impact tutoring, we're trying to get these relationships to students that they don't necessarily have in school already. Why is it? I'm trying to think in terms of like how AI would help. It might be first good to understand why we don't get these to students right now, because we know so many high school students and middle school students don't feel like they have an adult who knows them in the school, don't feel like they belong in the school. Where does that relationship tend to break down, getting students that person who really knows them? Linda, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I'm ready for that one. Well, really, this is the sort of the end point of the factory model, which I think we're gradually trying to unseat and replace with other approaches. But that model, particularly for middle and high school, suggested that you would just give teachers 30 kids at a time coming through in 50-minute periods, 180, 200, 220 in a lot of California districts is, not unusual. And you stamp them with a lesson over and over again. And then you give them a standardized curriculum with sort of, in California, we'll see a lot of pacing guides, which have to miss the needs of a lot of students. But also, in that kind of structure, the kids don't have people to hold on to. So we have a lot of schools that are trying to redesign and that are creating ways by which, a team of teachers works with a shared group of kids, and there's an advisory system, there's a family group where the student would be well known, and there are, a variety of ways to personalize. But in addition to personalizing the relationships, which is very important, you also have to personalize the learning process. And we have to break out of the misimpression that that system has conveyed, that everyone will learn everything in the same way at the same time. We just know that not to be true. And as a result of having held to that idea, we end up with tracking systems. If you interject a tutoring model or a personalized model that teaches kids what they need to know when they need to know it, you could get rid of tracking because kids would then be able to proceed to get what they need at the point where they need it. And I saw that in Finland, but you can see it lots of other places. So really, we have to rethink the model for middle and high school.
And also understand what science is telling us, right? We do a lot of work on personalization, and in the past, we thought about smaller class sizes. And when I was in New York City, I remember sitting with Wendy Weingarten's team, looking at reducing class size. We're going by 0.1 and 0.2 and 0.4 across the system. Imagine if we're dividing by number of teachers. I kept saying, what the hell are we doing here? Yeah. To go from 34 to 33.6, right? That was the push.
Yeah.
It was so mechanical. When you think about, if you guys have read Todd Rose's book, The End of Average, we took that, first of all, he pushes very hard that there is no such thing as the average student or the average person. We all have a jagged learner profile. We are all neurodiverse. So how do you actually cater to the needs of individual children? Giving a teacher 34 kids in a classroom, 5 classes a day, and you get a factory moving through, you're never going to know the person in front of you. So we built this thing called the Learner Variability Navigator. It's a learning science platform that looks at factors of learning in math and literacy and the conditions and the person in front of you. You can write a dissertation on that particular platform. It's all learning science based. We're now taking it to the next level, attaching Gen and agentic AI to it to allow a teacher to create bespoke lessons in units for each individual child in that classroom or groups of kids in a classroom. What has to happen as a result, of course, is that the mechanics of the school has to allow for that teacher to sit and meet the needs of students. So take that and juxtapose it to what you begin to see across the country around the next generation workforce. Teams of adults supporting children. So if you have that model and you pit that against really a good staffing model, then you can get to the idea that education is human development and begin to address the needs of individual children. And that is the work that we need to do, frankly, in reshaping the system to actually serve the needs of children. It's not just small class sizes. If that was the case, special ed classrooms would be the best classrooms in the world, right? They're not. So the fact is it's not just class size, but allowing a team of adults, including parents, and maybe even an AI assistant, to support the needs of the individual needs of the children in front of you.
So one of the things, and this isn't a question we talked about, but it just reminds me, since you both said this, I hear a lot, why are you doing tutoring? Why not just train teachers, make teachers better, and then they'd be able to give this kind of relationship-based personalized instruction? How much is that a reasonable approach, really at any grade or at specific grades, for trying to provide this, taking AI out of the picture right now, but just in general, trying to differentiate by better preparation for teachers?
There is something to be said for better preparation for teachers, and in an elementary context, now you may have anywhere between 20 or 40 kids in a classroom, depending on what state you're in and what district you're in. But if you have, 25 kids in your classroom and you loop with the students and you get to know their families and the students, you could do a lot of individualization and differentiation. And if you see a good preschool teacher teach, it's awesome. I mean, when I was a high school teacher, I still strive to be as good as a good preschool teacher because they really know where every kid is on every kind of development. But in the middle and high school, where we are dividing up the day and the people and the organization by departments, and you teach your one subject, although that does begin to change in some of these newer staffing models, which is a good thing, I think. There's just too many kids. Even if you personalize it, in some of these designs, you might have 100 kids shared by 4 teachers. That's better than 200, but it's still not going to allow you the time to really do all of the things you need to do. So you have to think about who are the other adults And where can you put them? Either in the classroom, and some of the tutoring studies have tutors right there in the classroom. You might have an extra period in the day. You might have expanded learning time. You have to think more broadly about learning time and not assume that it's just going through the standardized curriculum 5 or 6 times a day. Even when you care deeply about your students, which I did as a high school English teacher, you cannot know 150 kids or even 120 and find the time to differentiate fully for all of them. And finding ways to allow them to be working at the level where they are on the things that they need to work on, you see this dramatic acceleration in their skills and their sense of confidence. You have to rearrange the school to allow for that time and the people to do it.
I mean, I absolutely agree, but think about what AI and technology is doing for us in terms of data. I mean, in a small way, analyzing the amount of information coming to a particular teacher. I remember one teacher in my high school, when I was a high school principal, an English teacher was given a writing assignment. He said he was so tempted to get to the subway and just dump all the papers in the subway tracks. Because think about the amount of work.
I've had that thought.
Yes. You think about the amount of work it takes to have kids write and consistently going through the thinking. I saw something in Shanghai back in November that blew us away. It was mathematics. We saw teachers scanning a handwritten, I was watching the last panel, the handwritten piece, a math exam, solving word problems. And from the machine, the next day went to the university, East China University, ECNU, and we're watching that paper come up on the screen, and the AI is helping analyze the conceptions and misconceptions of those children, and feeding back to the teacher suggestions on how to actually address the needs for what they were seeing, getting real conceptual understanding of mathematics.
Right.
Think about what we're doing now in math and technology. A lot of it leans on the procedural thinking in math, which I think is why you're seeing the scores dropping in NAEP and everything else. We're testing on the conceptual level, but we're teaching on the procedural level. So think about how AI can actually help us understand what kids are doing, and then feeds back to the teacher. So again, the quality of information, the amount of information that can come to that. Take that to the next level. You're seeing things happening across teachers that can feed a coach, right? A mentor teacher to support groups of teachers. So I mean, there's so much that we can do to move the system along. But I think AI and technology can actually help us get there. But it has to be thoughtful. It has to be integrated, right? We can't outsource it to the machine.
And I think the point you're making about how AI can inform the teacher or the tutor is an important one, because a lot of times people have the image that somehow you're going to stick the kid in front of the computer and the computer's going to teach them, and you lose the personal element, you lose the capacity to explain things in multiple ways. So I think that's a really key piece. And I've seen that with the teacher at the front of the room getting all the data, and then they can turn right around and begin to differentiate by saying, okay, now we're going to take this area where there's a misconception, right? And then reteach that to the students who need it. If you have an interesting staffing model, you might have another adult who's working with the other kids, or you might have them using machine for a while on some practice problems, but it gives you the diagnostics that then allow you to move forward, also on the individual level with a tutor. So I think it's really important for us to be thinking about what does the AI do for the adults and for the teachers, as much as we think about what might it do for the students.
Yes, one last thing. So,
keep going, yes.
I've always loved Richard Elmore's framework, but the most important relationship in education is between teachers, students, and content. We learned from the pandemic is teachers, students, families, and content.
Yeah.
So think about what technology can do in really connecting the home and school in a way that's really meaningful to the student and to the teacher. Data can help us do that. AI can help us analyze to actually get there. Right now, it's a disconnected process where we think everything happens within the 4 walls of the school. Last night, I was watching my 16-year-old son, he's getting ready for his final. He was showing me how he's using Gemini. Took a screenshot of a problem, and he asked the machine, help me develop a study guide based on this problem. And here he was studying, doing that, 10 p.m. last night. I didn't push him toward AI, he found it. My question for me now about his school is how are they teaching teachers to actually leverage that kind of information? The school he goes to, when he was a freshman, was invited to a dinner. All I kept hearing was cheating. AI and cheating, AI and cheating. Actually got really annoyed and upset. Well, I began to invite the principal to our conferences and our meetings. I said, my kid can't go to a school where we're doing AI for 10 years of digital promise, where the only thing they're thinking about is cheating. There's so much more to this than just cheating. Yes, we have to elevate pedagogy, where a kid like Silas can actually do this work and not ask the teacher, for us to be able to provide the kinds of support the adults need to support the children.
Well, and just to sort of piggyback, we had a little of this conversation earlier. The reason that people started first on the cheating front is that so much of our curriculum that we've inherited, along with the factory model, is a transmission curriculum. You know, that you're supposed to learn from the teacher in the textbook facts and ideas that you then remember for the test. You know, that a lot of testing then has been, you know, spitting back the, you know, facts that you could now get through AI, you could get them through Google, whatever. And we've got to move the whole agenda to using the AI for information that you then do things with, that are meaningful and authentic and solve problems, use in the real world. And so that's the other piece of it, and that has to be the way our tests evolve also, which is another whole agenda.
Yes. I love the first question, the last panel. I'm sorry, I'm taking over your panel, Susanna. Around productive.
I know, my question was, before we talk about AI, let's, no, but you
Yes. We did warn her during the prep session that we may take over the panel. You know, the first question on the first question on productive struggle in the panel was in this room was intriguing because people think about productive struggle in a way that is yesterday and not tomorrow, today. Many of our kids are walking to school with a ton of content knowledge, or ones that can easily get from a machine. How do you elevate pedagogy to a place where productive struggle is much more meaningful? I often brag about the fact that I'm a commercial pilot, and I train on analog equipment. I'm old enough to be able to say that. Now I fly a plane that is 2 giant iPads. Not yet AI, but certainly machine learning drives that thing. It's made me much safer, number one, as a pilot. And number two, now my whole piloting skills have to be elevated when analyzing information and making decisions with the machine. By the way, if you flew here, your commercial pilot and airline are collecting data, not just for the NTSB, but data that feeds back into the industry, would be United or American or Delta, to develop modules for training of that pilot or pilots if they see consistency across the work. This is how AI is now showing up in the world of aviation. So we have industries who are moving in that direction very quickly. Yet in education, we're still laggards, and we're talking about cheating overall when it comes to this kind of work.
Okay, I'm just going to pull us back. I totally agree on the cheating. I really think it's like no learning to learning is a much more interesting spectrum than, you know, no cheating to cheating. Nonetheless, I do think we can do all this differentiation and have all this potential for great learning, but unless we have a relationship that creates in moment to moment an incentive to put in that effort and to really feel like you can be successful and that somebody will be there and care if you're successful, we're unlikely to get equity in our schools and learning that really reaches all the students that we want to reach. So have you ever seen a situation where schools or any real educational institution is using AI in order to build these kinds of relationships and make sure that students have these kinds of supports that they need to really engage in the teaching at the right level?
Yeah. I just want to sort of underscore the point you're making about relationships. I did a literature review a few years back on technology used for at-risk students, and the clear findings from all the studies was that just sitting kids in front of an electronic workbook or whatever had no gains associated with it. The places where the gains are associated is when you have the right human interaction with the machines around building the relationships, the incentive structure, the human incentive structure, but also how do we then take the next step? How do we really ask the questions? How do we have a group of students who are working together on a problem, and then they can tap the technology, tap the AI, in this case, to really build it? So, we've got to figure out how all of that happens. There's a set of districts that I've been working with in various ways where they built their own AI tool with a tech developer who was not interested in making money, but just in giving them a tool. The students and the teachers built the tool to meet their needs. And they're using it. Now another half dozen districts are also using it. Teachers wanted to do performance assessment. The tool allows students to upload their performance assessments. Teachers can get various kinds of information from it, both from their own reading of it and doing some of the more mundane scoring very quickly so they can work more on the higher order thinking skills. The curriculum is inputted so the tutor knows the curriculum, knows the kid and their interests. The kid tells them about what they want and what they need and what they want to learn from them so they can use it with their homework or whatever. But then it comes back with the teacher being involved with the students around the big authentic tasks that they're undertaking. So it's fascinating to see how people can build now. I mean, I was with a couple of teenagers yesterday who've built whole AI, infrastructures themselves to meet their own needs with adults who are then helping them think about what are the next questions to tackle. So I think there are places where it's really generative as well as responsive.
Yeah, and some of these have, in order to get these kinds of relationships to students, you're going to need multiple adults. And I think some of the tools organize those adults well, too. So it's less about the student working on the tool. We had a student at Stanford who created this program called Journify that is focused on special education, but really its power is that everybody who works with a student with a learning difference gets the kind of same information. So they share that, and then that alone makes scaling something like this easier.
And you can query it. You can say, hey, what was successful for this student last year without reading 45 pages of an IEP, trying to figure out if there's any information there at all that's useful to you, right?
Yeah. And you can spend more time with the
No, I mean, I was in a school
student.
a few weeks ago outside of Seattle in Issaquah School District. This high school really was focused on a portrait of a learner. And one of the students was demonstrating how he's actually measuring the development of his skills around collaboration, critical thinking, et cetera. Again, leveraging technology. That school does have an exemption from the traditional testing regimen, but really pushing this notion around elevating pedagogy or looking at really what matters. The most interesting school I visited was actually in China, in Beijing, where the focus was on creativity. The principal came out of Atlanta and left the US because of the red-blue fight that we're having in the US and went back home. The young man who created the school is 28 years old, called high school a prison when he was in high school and wanted something different. He claimed he was not legal for 5 years. Now he is totally legal, and the focus is entirely on creativity. I was taking pictures. I was emailing my head of school here in Silicon Valley. My kids go to a school in Menlo Park. And I said, Jim, I'm watching Synapse in Beijing. He goes, hell no. I said, look at these pictures. We saw issues of iteration, collaboration, creativity. All that was the foci that we saw in that particular school. The underpinning was really how you use technology to actually get there. So we're watching other nations do this. I'm watching it beginning to happen in the US. I will not say it's systemic, but we're seeing schools within the League of Innovative Schools really diving into this. In some cases, it's a teacher. In some cases, it's a school. I've not yet seen it at a systemic level. I think that's the work that needs to come.
Well, and I think we have to plan and organize for that because the statement that was made about 30-some% of people using AI for companionship, that's very dangerous in lots of ways. And we're seeing some of the side effects of that psychologically. And if your model is putting a person with an AI tool, and that's it, it's a one-on-one relationship, you're not only missing these opportunities that you were describing for collaboration and for multiple forms of learning, but you're also reducing the human relationship piece of it and constructing what can be a very dangerous relationship only with the machine.
Yeah, I think we've been thinking in our research group about this kind of continuum between just an AI tutor for a student and a human tutor for a student with no AI in it, but just how much how many things there are in between. So you can have a human tutor that gets a co-pilot, a little support as they're tutoring, or a little coaching as they're doing it, or some materials differentiated for their student. But you could also have the student work part-time with the AI tutor and part-time with the human tutor, and the human can kind of encourage them to use it. Or you could go to they're using an AI tutor, but there's a human there kind of working with them. So if you were, of course, there's the great things about building creativity and autonomous motivation and all these things, but if you really wanted to improve early literacy or make sure students really understand algebra, and you wanted to talk to a district and school leaders here, what would you tell them about how AI might allow you to leverage relationships and personalized instruction to benefit in those areas?
Well, actually, I'm trying to do that right now, actually. That's exactly the work we're trying to do right now, Digital Promise, in a number of different places. And a lot of it is leaning on two different constructs. One was a work we're doing in Texas in 14 districts. And a World Bank study, an RCT just came out from the World Bank in Nigeria. If you've not seen it, you should see it. They're talking about getting 1.6 to 2 years of gain in 6 weeks using an AI tutor. But this is the trick. The AI tutor is pitted against a coherent instructional framework and good pedagogy. The teacher does not step back. The teacher is actively involved with the tutor in making progress, aligns with curricula, right? Without that kind of infrastructure, you're not going to get that kind of acceleration. But to get it, you need a really good set of instructional systems, good pedagogical practice. You put that against or align to an AI tutor, you're going to get really rapid gains. So one thing that we're trying to do right now in systems is thinking about really what it would take to show that across an entire system. Just imagine the complexity, right? You need policies, you need practices, you need curricula, you need pedagogical support for teachers. All the cascading set of efforts need to align in a way that one creates a kind of coherent system of instruction. And many of our systems, by the way, don't have that. You think they do, they don't really have it. And if you put the technology in place without that, you're not going to get the results. But imagine what happens. Again, the RCT demonstrates that. You put that kind of work against that kind of coherent system, you're going to get true acceleration. And when I say acceleration, but deep fluency, where you can have transfer. This RCT demonstrates that the movement in literacy, in English literacy in Nigeria, in a low resource environment, didn't just happen in English literacy, but transfer happened in other subject areas as well, and it was durable as well too. So if you want to Google it, it's on the web. It's a World Bank study. An RCT came out a few months ago to really showcase what can happen with I think they use GPT-4 against this coherent system, and they're seeing durable gains and rapid acceleration and fluency.
I'll just kind of build on that and say that, if you think about early literacy, which is the example you gave, you could be thinking about a way that the tutor, the AI mechanism, is helping the tutor understand the student's reading and what they need to do next. You can imagine, and there actually is a tool which is becoming even more smart, called Rally Reader, I guess is what it's called. Kids can read into the tutor, and then it will do a miscue analysis of what they struggle with, what kind of phonemes or blends or whatever, and give it back to the teacher, who then, or the human tutor, who then can work with that around the work with the student. The student can also do work with the teacher that allows them to hear the student reading and watch what they're doing and so on, and then go practice with the AI tool. It could go in multiple ways. I do think that there's so much to know to teach well. How many teachers are in the room? Thank you, all of you, for what you do. And a lot of times folks don't realize how complicated teaching is. I mean, you're thinking about kids who learn in different ways, who have different sort of psychological profiles around learning, as well as different, literal profiles and so on, to be able to get some feedback about aspects of the student's performance that you can then teach around the next time, and do that for large groups of students, but also one-on-one, is part of what makes this tool so valuable potentially to teachers. So it's I think, going to end up being at least as valuable in that way as working directly with students themselves. And if a student is working with a tool like an AI tool for practicing something or asking questions and learning about it, like, I will just say my daughter was a graduate student. She needed to understand structural equations modeling. She had a human tutor, her brother, but she went to the AI platform as well. And together they learned enough about what she needed to know to be able to apply it and so on. So that's another way that you could imagine tutors, human and AI tutors and tutees all working together around things. But at the end of the day, even if the student is using that tool, they're also going to want to read aloud to their parent or to their tutor and get applause and get the human, incentives and rewards that you get from that, performance. Every kid will say, hey, look at me. Hey, listen to me. That still has to be there, and you can build that into the relationship.
Yeah, and I think tools like this would allow us to use college students, to use just graduates from college to come in and be that extra.
And they'll get smarter about teaching,
and
right?
they'll get smarter about teaching, exactly. So we're going to do one last quick question answer from both of them, and who would like to ask them that question?
Oh.
Okay, right there.
Thoughts on the costs, both the environmental costs and the financial costs, especially in a context where, teachers in this country are grotesquely underpaid for what they do.
How do you deal with the environmental and the actual financial costs of the AI?
Well, I mean, maybe I'll lay a little bit on the World Bank piece. Again, low resource environment. I don't know if I can get into the environmental costs of technology or AI and climates, et cetera. But I think there's a lot that can be done to facilitate the work, to make it much more efficient in what we do, so we get the outcomes we're looking for in schools. I don't think we can afford not to engage the technology in a way that's meaningful. I think we have to have guardrails in all of that. My complaint, my worry is, as a nation, we're not creating centralized leadership to look at this in all the facets of the guardrails, the issues, and the positiveness of AI. And we're allowing, frankly, a lot of disparate sort of institutions to own this. And to Linda's point, allowing big tech to actually drive the agenda, I think is dangerous for us as a nation. From what I've seen in other nations, I was in Uruguay last year, in China in November, I'm seeing centralized efforts around this kind of work in many places. I'm not seeing, frankly, happening in the US.
I've just become aware of the environmental costs. I am not a technologist by training, and so those are worrisome in ways that, those of us who are just coming at it from a different knowledge base did not really appreciate until recently. So I think that's a really important question, and that gets back to who's doing it and how are we doing it and how much is being built in terms of data centers and all the rest of it. Some of it just for profit as opposed to for doing things that you want to actually get better at doing. I think that if we think about, first of all, teachers need to be paid much better in the United States. In the United States, the average teacher is paid about 25% less than the average college worker, who goes into a similarly educated person who goes into a different profession. So that's like just a starting point. But I also think that part of the challenge of paying teachers much better is also finding ways to then use the college students and the paraprofessionals and so on in ways that are more productive, to augment the work that teachers do, not to get rid of teachers, not to replace teachers with technology, but to imagine a much more variegated staffing model which people are beginning to use and develop in various places so that you can do more things for kids in ways that are informed by, I think, the kinds of tools that we're talking about. And that will, if the right people are making decisions with the right values, allow teachers to be better paid and kids ultimately to also be better served.
The job right now is not sustainable, bottom line.
I think that's just the right place to stop, because for the future, I really do think these alternative staffing models that allow more personalization, that are more flexible, and to meet the needs of all the students we have is a place that we have to go and we actually really can go. So thank you both for being such wonderful panelists.